Hello, everyone. So the start of this module, we're going to talk about school psychology. And school psychology is a subfield that not everybody knows about, and that a lot of students are interested in once they find out about it. So school psychology, as it sounds like, involves working in K through 12 schools. And typically, a lot of your job is done doing assessments. So testing for things like learning disabilities, sometimes things like giftedness, things along those lines. In addition, working with students on and their families and their teachers on IEPs or whatever your particular jurisdiction calls it, individualized education plans, essentially. So if they need accommodations, what are the accommodations they need? How can those be met realistically within the school framework? Now, there are other subfields within the school systems that you can get involved with. So, for example, being a school counselor or a guidance counselor is something that often takes a lot less education than being a school psychologist. You can be involved with students that way. Your careers book also talks about using things like being a teacher, being a teacher's aide, for example, as ways that you can do this. So it is a nice field to get into if you like kids, right? And certainly we need these type of people in our schools, although there's not always a ton of money to do so. So for example, in richer school districts, large school districts, you may be lucky enough to have one school psychologist per school. However, I do know someone from rural Virginia who is the school psychologist for the entire school district, which I believe is the entire county. So she spends all her time going from school to school to school to school to school, just again, because they don't have that many resources, she's it. In terms of the ethical issues that they run into, in addition to thinking about all the typical ethical issues when you're working with clients, you also have to navigate FERPA, which is the law that is the educational equivalent of HIPAA in the healthcare system. So there are rules and regulations about what you can and or what you must release. As your ethics book kind of points out, sometimes there are some quandaries here, right? So sometimes you might run into issues where the information you have isn't kept separate from educational records. And so in theory, anyone could access it. You shouldn't be able to do that unless you're qualified, right? You might run into some issues with, testing materials. People want to see everything, but there are, like for clinical psychologists and like for legal psychologists, we'll talk about the second half of this module, there are regulations in terms of copyright law, test security, things along those lines in terms of what you can and can't release. So it is an exciting subfield. You can get into it with a master's, or there's a degree sort of in between the master's and the PhD. There are some great videos on YouTube videos on Blackboard that help you kind of explore that a little bit. And it is a nice way to make a difference in some kids' lives. So I hope that you enjoy finding out about this new subfield of psychology that you might not have known about.